Many Europeans were watching the US election very closely, especially when you take into account US foreign policy, which you know has affected Europe by creating the conditions for the refugee crisis, which is not mentioned in our corporate media as much. The US policy in the Middle East created the conditions for the refugee crisis. So we know that Bernie Sanders became more and more vocal when it came to the military-industrial complex. I believe he even talked about the 1953 CIA coup in a talk, recent talk. So now that Bernie's out of the race, people are now looking at the European US election in terms of Biden or Trump. And there we see a split in the left where people are saying, for example, there's one camp which says, wait, Biden is better because at least under Obama, Biden pushed for the nuclear deal, for the Iran nuclear deal, which you mentioned, the GCPOA. Whereas others are saying, look at Donald Trump. He's gonna cause a war. He assassinated General Soleimani. So just based on Iran, which could lead to World War III if the situation escalates with Iran, we should vote for Biden because he was an adamant supporter, or became one, as you mentioned. In the beginning, they were escalating the sanctions, but eventually they did sign a deal. So what do you make of this dilemma, and how would you view it?
Effectively, there are no significant political differences between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. I'm sorry for the people who are trying to convince themselves that it would be somehow categorically different. These two political leaders, and not just the leaders, but the movements around them, the institutional apparatuses around them, and the political parties that they're members of, there are very few political differences between them. Joe Biden, really quickly, let's review his record. He not only strongly supported the criminal Iraq war, he in fact whipped votes for Democratic members of Congress. That means inside the Congress, he as a Democrat was whipping other Democratic votes. He was trying to get their votes in support of George W. Bush's war, of the Republican president's war. He praised George W. Bush, calling him a great leader, and supported this war that killed 1 million Iraqis. We can never forget that. He was not just a tepid supporter. It was not just an error he made out of bad judgment. He was an active person who he actively supported this criminal crime against humanity. And that was part of a long trajectory, even before George W. Bush, even in the years of the 1990s when Bill Clinton was in power. Joe Biden strongly was pushing for U.S. military action against Saddam Hussein and Iraq. And again, I should keep in mind the irony here. We can't forget that Saddam Hussein himself came to power thanks to U.S. intervention in Iraq, thanks to U.S.-backed, CIA-backed coups in Iraq. And the CIA actually in the 1960s and 70s, and even through the 80s, was supporting Saddam Hussein. They gave Saddam Hussein a list of communists from the Iraqi Communist Party that he should purge and kill. And he did so in a very brutal bloodletting. And of course, I mentioned the Iran-Iraq War, in which the US and European countries helped Saddam Hussein use chemical weapons, including in Halabja against Kurdish civilians in a brutal genocidal campaign, the Anbal campaign. So let's never forget the role of the U.S. government in these brutal crimes. And Joe Biden always supported them. Joe Biden supported the war in Libya. Joe Biden supported the NATO war on Yugoslavia. Both of those NATO wars destroyed the countries of Libya and Yugoslavia. And Libya, let's keep in mind, this war backed by the Obama administration and Joe Biden. This is a country with a total failed state today and with open-air slave markets. Another war sold on lies like the Iraq War. And then, of course, coming back to Iran. Okay, sure, Biden did support the nuclear deal, but he also supported putting sanctions on Iran in the first place. So this is a man, we cannot trust his judgment. And even if he was in a situation of stable mental health, we could not trust his judgment. And the elephant in the room that we have to simply discuss openly is Joe Biden is suffering from a very serious case of dementia. He can barely give a speech in public without completely bungling his words. He sounds almost incomprehensible at times, and he just says genuinely insane things. And that is a very real problem. It is not ageist to bring it up. And if he is in a debate with Donald Trump, I mean, Donald Trump has his own forms of dementia, but Donald Trump will absolutely demolish Joe Biden. So just from the perspective of whether or not he can actually win the election, I do not think that Biden really has realistic chances of winning. And then, of course, there's the economic policy. Joe Biden was a major supporter, a sponsor of the bill that reformed basically the entire law on bankruptcy, known as the bankruptcy bill in the US, that essentially was written by large corporations and banks. So it is really impossible for individuals to ever get out of their debt bondage. People are trapped in debt bondage for their entire lives, but it's very easy for corporations to declare bankruptcy and write off their own debt. And this is part of a long pattern of Biden basically acting as a voice for Wall Street. At the end of the day, sure, Biden is not as overtly racist as Trump, but Biden is also racist. He's made a lot of racist remarks. He has praised segregationist leaders and said that he was proud of working with them. And also, let's not forget that the Obama administration, which claimed to be anti-racist and engaged in this kind of woke politics, the Obama administration still deported more people than any other U.S. presidential administration, even more so far than Trump. Even at this point in the Trump administration, with his first term nearly over, the Obama administration at this point in its first term still deported more people. In all, the Obama administration deported 2.7 million people, nearly 3 million people. I remember going to protests during the Obama years and reporting on some of them organized by Latino Americans, Latino activists, who referred to Obama for years as the deporter-in-chief. And of course, Joe Biden was part and parcel of that campaign. So, look, people might say that, oh, Biden is so much better than Trump because at least he's not going to go on TV and say extremely racist stuff. Okay, I mean, yeah, Trump is a horrible bigot, but it's not just about rhetoric. Yeah, Trump is a far-right bigot. He's completely impolite. He is racist in his rhetoric. But at the end of the day, his policies are shared by, his racist policies are shared by many of these Democrats, including Joe Biden. Joe Biden is from the right wing of an already right-wing party. The Democratic Party is an objectively right-wing party. So, look, people are going to spend the next several months just convulsing over the election and trying to convince everyone that they have to vote for Joe Biden. But we have to be realistic about who this character is and the people around him too. These are people who worked on the Hillary Clinton campaign, who worked on the Bill Clinton campaign, and their entire ideology is neoliberalism. That is what they believe. They believe in war, they believe in military intervention, and they believe in the free market and neoliberal policies. So, at the end of the day, Trump might be on the surface level more rude, more overtly racist, more overtly bigoted, but when it comes to the actual policies, Biden and Trump share almost an identical policy program.